Start exactly on 5. We can start a couple minutes after that, like until we get things up. Oh my God, lounge is being locked. Anas, can you fix that?
Wait, what? It doesn't lock, yeah.
Wasn't during the debate, we already discussed this. During the debate, only you're on stage moderating the actual debate. The rest of the staff are monitoring the chats.
Yes, for God's sake,
Yeah, please guys get off stage, inshallah. Just me, Hawazin, and Silverado on stage.
Yes. Inshallah. And Decepti, focus on the verification because you said that was your thing. So yalla, because I'm already seeing a lot of people.
Assalamu alaikum, Silverado. Are you ready?
Wa alaikum salam. Yeah.
1 second. Channel.
And I would just like to remind the audience, in the chats that are open for you guys to text in, please maintain respect. No need for the kind of casual tomfoolery, as they say. No, like insulting religious figures. No trolling, no vulgarity, or anything of the sort. Otherwise, that will have to entail you getting timed out, which will mean that you won't be able to listen to the debate in the meanwhile, right? And so it's better just to avoid this kind of behavior for the benefit of everyone.
Hawazin, everyone's ready. Do you want to go ahead and get started with the your intro and the rules and all that?
Wait, real quick before that, the Silverado evidence and Super Amal evidence channels. Only Amr and Silverado should be able to type in their own respective channels. So, can you check?
Type in there. Can you upload images in your channel?
Yeah, check.
I can.
Amr, can you do it in his channel?
Yeah, but obviously like an admin.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Is there an echo on my side?
No, it's fine for me. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, so we're gonna wait just for 3 more minutes, inshallah, then get started. I'll just get things. Okay. All right. I'm just trying to. Again, to the staff members, I'm not even going to be looking at verification, so that's your responsibility. Take a look at the verification channel. Okay, let's check everything else. How's my mic? Because I've had some complaints about that.
No, your mic is fine. How's mine?
Yeah, it's fine. But my usual mic is not working now. All right, so that's good. People are tuning in. So we'll give it 2 more minutes, inshallah. And we'll begin. And please don't DM me while in the middle of the debate because, I'm most likely not going to look at them because I'm going to be receiving a lot. Okay, mashallah, 75 people.
Why don't you go ahead and start with your intro, Hawazin, and then inshallah by the time 2 minutes has passed, we can start the actual debate.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of have the biggest number of people, inshallah, joining the thing. Okay. Also, I'll start the opening statement. Okay, so the recording can start, am I right?
Yep.
Okay. So, assalamu alaikum everyone. Bismillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. We welcome you to this big debate, this critical and important debate between two great debaters, Umar and Silverado. So, if you've read the announcement, as we said, we're going to be talking about the 12th Imam in 12 Shiism, and most importantly, the deputies of the Imam. And if some of you have a question about why is this question significant in any way, now Umar will argue that that the 12th Imam, the deputies of the 12th Imam were not appointed. They were appointed after the minor ghaiba. Or the occultation, which, as Umar argues, would mean that the narrative about the Imam was a later development, made up later on, which kind of strikes the integrity of 12 Shiism. And obviously, brother Silverado will be defending the traditional 12 narrative regarding the Imam and his deputies. So that's pretty much the topic. I'm expecting that the debaters will give a little bit of brief introductions about what they're trying to argue about. So yeah, that's really for the introduction. Who's starting first, if I remember correctly? It's
me.
It's you, Amar. Okay. All right. Let me just set up the timer real quick. So 10 minutes, inshallah. So how about I actually, first of all, just quickly, present the format. So in the first, so in the beginning, 10 minutes for Amar to give their opening statements, and then 10 minutes for Silverado to make his case as well. And then there will be 5-minute rebuttals, one 5-minute rebuttal from Umar and from Silverado. And then there will be a second rebuttal round with the same duration. And then there will be a cross-examination between both debaters for 20 minutes. After that, there will be a just conclusions, 5 minutes for both, just to kind of conclude their points. And in the end, there will be a 20-minute Q&A. And we will make a channel where you guys can post your questions, or in fact, maybe you can even come on stage and ask the questions. And lastly, in the end, we're going to have, after the debate is done, we're going to have a informal discussion in VC in the server. We're expecting a big VC where if you have any questions or any things you want to criticize Umar on and push on his points, you can go there and talk to him directly in that VC. It's going to be an open discussion for everyone to be involved. So with that being said, Umar, go ahead with your 10-minute opening statements.
Started?
Yeah, I started time. Go.
Okay. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yawm ad-din. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. We begin by praising Allah and thanking Allah for giving this opportunity to engage in respectful open discourse. I also want to thank Silverado for agreeing to this debate. After extending this offer to dozens of others, Silverado was the first kind of 12er to agree to this debate, and I think this indicates a level of sincerity. I hope and I pray that you're rewarded for this, inshallah. May Allah preserve you, guide you, and me as well, for whatever shortcomings I may have in understanding the religion, whose completion occurred with the passing of Al-Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I want to start this debate with a brief review of the way that Sunni-Shia polemics is typically done, and then propose an alternative framework for analyzing our differing worldviews, right? The Sunnis and Twelvers both have very extensive, rich collections of hadith and narrations from which we extract our respective beliefs. We both employ a set of tools with which such hadiths are filtered, which have been formalized in the form of what we now call hadith science. Hadiths are generally considered problematic if they do not align with doctrines that are propagated by the prominent scholars. In both corpuses, we generally do not find books collecting said narrations which were authored contemporary with people from whom the narrations are taken. Just reworded, people such as Bukhari did not meet the Prophet ﷺ. Kulaini did not meet Ja'far as-Sadiq. In order for the narration to get from the person who spoke it to the person who compiled it in a book, which has survived till today, we rely on chains of narration. We employ a process or a tool called Ilm al-Rijal to assess whether the narration was transmitted correctly and without tampering. We employ a kind of abductive argument to conclude that a narration which is transmitted by trustworthy people who met each other from whom they're narrating is likely to be correctly attributed to the original person who said the narration. In the case of the 12er corpus, the standard narrative is that this also extends to chains of custody of written works. So, companion of the Imam had a book that he may have secretly passed down to people over generations until that book landed in the hands of a famous muhaddith, who then included the contents of this book into his masterpiece, which kind of conglomerates these usul, right? So, Kitab al-Kafi, for example, compiling a subset of 400 usul. There's also the issue of codicology, which helps us determine if these books that we have, like Kitab al-Kafi, Kitab al-Ghaiba by Nu'mani al-Tusi, are actually even correctly attributed to their authors. But in the interest of time, I'm going to skip going over that. And let's just take for granted, right, that what we have today called al-Kafi was actually authored by al-Kulaini and so on and so forth. What we find more often than not is that the traditions which are considered to be authentic align with major beliefs of the religion. So obviously both 12verism and Sunnism have scholars who have done the tedious work of deriving a set of beliefs that are backed by the corpus. Typically, Sunni 12ver discourse tends to depend on this idea that if you find enough narrations within the opposite corpus that contradict the standard narrative of the sect, this somehow proves its falsehood. But more often than not, what we find is that this is kind of a fruitless effort, because the scholars have already done the work of making sure that the corpus aligns with the sect's beliefs. My opponent was famously part of a project called the Shia Hadith Project, where they found that sometimes there's evidence to suggest that narrators are actually, like, the process is done backwards, where narrators are deemed untrustworthy because of what they narrate instead of the opposite way around, right? That what's found to be authentic and inauthentic is based on who narrates it. Long story short, Orthodox Sunni beliefs generally align with authentic narrations in the Sunni corpus, and 12er Orthodox beliefs generally align with authentic narrations in the 12er corpus. Yet both sects would reject narrations from the opposite sect if they do not align with their own beliefs. So, for example, Exhibit E is one such example, is an example of one such narration. All narrators in this hadith are graded with the highest level of trustworthiness. But if confronted with this hadith, the 12er would simply reject that these words were said by Ali radiallahu anh on the basis that he is not under any obligation to accept the trustworthiness of the people in the chain. The gradings of the persons in the chain were made by Sunni scholars. It is not inconceivable for a 12er that these Sunni scholars simply made up personalities or incorrectly graded liars as being trustworthy because they narrated things that were favorable to the Sunni narrative. I would concede that this line of reasoning is sound to an extent. If I were a dishonest person, I could easily attribute a saying to, for example, Joe Biden with a chain of 3 or 4 narrators, and have another liar friend of mine, an untrustworthy friend, write a book of Rijal, declaring that such people are all trustworthy. This does little in the way of assuring that the saying was actually said by Joe Biden. So to this end, I would like to suggest an alternate framework with which to authenticate claims. Is there a sect-neutral, madhab-neutral method of authenticating whether certain sayings or beliefs were in fact said or held by opinions by people to whom they're attributed? I want to employ a framework known as argumentum e silentio, or the argument from silence, which is a tool widely used in academia, especially in history. I want to turn your attention to Exhibit F, which kind of goes over what this tool is and discusses it more in detail. And so basically the argument is as follows, right? The 12er conception of ghaiba had a clear evolution from start to finish, growing in level of detail from al-Kulaini to the time of al-Tusi, right? The canonical narrative of exactly 4 deputies was not even in wide circulation at the time of Kulaini. For him to have included it in his Kitab al-Kafi, which is supposed to be this comprehensive book. Now, was Kulaini even privy to this information? That it certainly does call into question whether or not Kulaini was aware of this narrative. Kulaini actually died in the same year as the 4th deputy, so he was contemporary to the deputies, but neglected to mention this 4 deputies narrative in his own book. To make matters worse, Kulaini's student, An-Nu'mani, who dedicated an entire book to resolving the questions surrounding the ghaiba narrative, neglected to include any mention of exactly who the deputies were. We see in Exhibit A, Nu'mani actually had every opportunity to discuss the identities of the deputies. In fact, he goes into, there's this part of Kitab al-Ghaiba where he, delineates what the job of the deputies are and the role that they're going to play in the minor ghaiba. But he, forgets to mention who they actually are. I assert, right, that, and based on the conditions in Exhibit F from the argument from silence criteria, that the fact that Nu'mani and Kulaini and other scholars, contemporary to Imam al-Askari, As-Safar, for example, the author of Basar al-Darajat, the fact that these people neglected to mention who the deputies were is indicative of the fact that they in fact did not know, because the narrative was evolving. It wasn't even crystallized at that time. It was still in the process of being formulated, meaning that if the deputy narrative was not crystallized even at the time of the death of the fourth deputy, it's almost inconceivable that Imam al-Askari himself is the one who perpetuated this, gave them authority. Exhibit K shows that they had every reason to. There's people running around claiming to be the deputies, false claimants to deputyship, and instead of refuting these heresies, there was no explicit mention in surviving works of who the deputies were. So a couple more examples. Exhibit L, Exhibit H, Exhibit I.
And we have a minute left, by the way.
That's about it for my opening statement. But these scans, basically, these last couple show. Oh, I need to provide the reference from which these scans are derived. 1 second. The book where I got these scans. Exhibit G, yeah. So Exhibit G. This is the book where a couple of later scans are found. And so the argument here, right, with these last couple of scans is that there are a bunch of heresies floating around where, people were claiming to be the deputy. And what you would expect is for scholars to go and refute their claims to deputyship by saying, no, you're not the deputy. The Imam clearly appointed, Uthman ibn Sa'ad al-Amri to be the deputy, not you, right? We don't find that. There's a kind of silence from the scholarship on this issue. And so if unless my opponent is able to provide a more robust hypothesis for why they were silent on the issue, I would conclude that this implies that because the narrative wasn't crystallized at that time.
Okay, that's it for your 10 minutes for opening statement. Salvarado, you can go ahead with your opening statement, and whenever you begin, I'll start the timer.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum everyone, and thank you Omar for debating and Hawazin for moderating. So for my evidences, I'd like to post a PDF which has some slides. I put it in my Silverado evidence channel. So if you can follow along on there, it's easier because I'm relying on a bunch of chain maps for which it's much easier to just post a single document rather than going through them and posting each one individually. So I'll start by briefly discussing the background of this debate. So when Super Omar first asked me to debate him on this subject, I first thought it would be pointless because the Sunnis don't even accept the imamat of the 12th Imam, let alone his predecessors. So what's the purpose of debating about the deputies? But Super Omar argued using the analogy that if X is necessarily followed by Y, and Y is not true, then that means that X can't be true either. Meaning by this that if the imamat of Imam Ali alayhi salam is necessarily followed by that of by the occultation and the imamat of the 12th Imam, that if the occultation doctrine was proven to be a fabrication, that means that Imam Ali alayhi salam was not appointed as an Imam either. Well, sure, but then in this case, you have to prove that the occultation narrative cannot possibly be true from within the Shi'i paradigm. So that's what I expect from Omar's arguments today, to prove that the occultation cannot possibly have occurred and that the deputies were obviously false. So having said that, let's move on to some historical context for the occultation. So the first hadith for which I've put a chain map is a hadith attributed to Imams Baqara and Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, which says that there will be 12 muhaddathun after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And a muhaddith is someone who can hear the angels. So this hadith is about the imams. And something that's interesting to point out is that Ali ibn Abi Hamza also narrates this hadith from Abu Basir. And he later on goes on to become a Waqifi. So you see that even him, before his deviation, narrated this hadith about the 12 imams. And the point of showing these chain maps is to show multiplicity of chains and to show that these doctrines can be traced early on because of tawatur. And even if you don't trace them back to the imams, even if you claim that these are falsely attributed to the imams, they undisputably go back to before the ghaiba. So we can see that before the actual 12th imam was born, we already had hadith saying that there would be 12 imams. And the next hadith that I showed chain map for us shows the same thing. This is for the Emerald Tablet hadith, in which Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari sees from Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam a tablet which contains the names of the 12 imams. And then we also see that there are hadith mentioning 12 imams in the hadith of the other sects. So we find in Fi Nusrat al-Waqifa, which is a book of the Waqifis, who are the sect that believed in only 7 imams and stopped with Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam, and believed that he was the Mahdi who went into ghaiba. They reported a hadith which comes from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, which says, O Sa'id, 12. When 6 pass, Allah will grant victory upon the 7th, and 5 from us, that Ahlul Bayt, will rule. So even this hadith is mentioning that even though the 7th imam is the Qa'im, there will be 5 more after him. So even the Waqifis knew of this hadith of 12 imams existing, such that rather than try to deny this, they had to instead try to make a cope around it, which is that 5 more imams would come after the Qa'im and rule. And we also, of course, know of the famous hadith of the 12 caliphs from Sahih Muslim. So all of this shows is that this idea that there would be 12 predates the occultation. So it's not that, for example, Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam died without a son, and that forced the Shia to stop at 12 imams. But this was something that was expected previously. And we also see in the next chain map, we see the necessity of a divine authority. So the Hujjah. The Shia believe that there must always be a Hujjah on the earth representing Allah. And this is a chain map. You can see the huge multiplicity of the chains. And this is only in Al-Kafi. You can find the same hadith listed in a number of other books. But this shows that this belief also predates the ghaiba and was prevalent among the Shia. The next chain map shows the Mahdi being born in secret. So this also shows that the idea that the Mahdi was to be born in secret was also known to the Shia prior to the ghaiba, as you can see from this chain map, which demonstrates a huge multiplicity of chains going back long before the ghaiba. And then the next 3 chain maps are from Kitab al-Ghaiba of al-Nu'mani, Kitab al-Ghaiba of al-Tusi, and al-Kafi by al-Kulaini. And these are talking about there being 2 ghaibas. So even the idea of 2 ghaibas again was predicted before the actual 2 ghaibas occurred. And what we find that's really interesting is that in Fi Nusrat al-Waqifa, again, we find Waqifi hadith about the 2 occultations. So this hadith going to Imam Sadiq saying the master of this authority will have 2 disappearances. One of them is longer until it is said he died, and some will say he was killed. So none will remain upon his affair save but a small band from his companions, and no one will be informed of his location and his affair, and not other than him to the free slave who will follow his authority. So even the Waqifis had hadith that there would be 2 different ghaibas, and they applied this to Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam in that he had 2 periods of imprisonment, so they claimed that these corresponded to the 2 ghaibas. Now somebody may claim, okay, Fi Nusrat al-Waqifa reaches us through Tusi, so how do we know this isn't fabricated? Well, the hadith also contradict 12er doctrine, so it doesn't really make sense that if Tusi was going to fabricate hadith to attribute them to the Waqifa and then refute them, that he would create hadith which actually are against the Shia narrative, and then only to refute them and attribute them to the Waqifis when the Waqifis existed in his time and didn't believe in these things. And we also see is Abu Sahel al-Nawbakhti in his Tanbih, which was written during the minor occultation, around the year 290 Hijri or 903 AD, suggests that the greater occultation had begun due to a pause in letters received from the 12th Imam alayhi salam. So he says, and the correspondence has ceased, so it is correct for us to establish the existence of the Imam by what we've mentioned of the argument and the correctness of his occultation by the famous accounts regarding the Imam's occultation, and that he has two occultations, one more intense than the other. So during the minor ghaiba, Abu Sahl al-Nawbakhti is writing saying that the major ghaiba has started, or he believes the major ghaiba to have started, because of the pause in letters. So why would Abu Sahl be trying to apply hadith about two ghaibas unless there were already hadith about two ghaibas? Because there had not come a necessity for him to invent the doctrine of the two ghaibas. Like you can say after the second ghaiba, these later scholars like Tusi and Saduq, etc., just fabricated this doctrine. But Abu Sahl al-Nawbakhti during the minor ghaiba is already writing that there's a second ghaiba and distinguishing between a smaller ghaiba and a larger ghaiba. Another evidence we see is Ibn Qaba al-Razi also writing during the minor occultation, and he died during the minor occultation. So that's major proof that this was written during the minor occultation. So in a tract against the Ja'fariya, meaning the followers of Ja'far al-Kadhab, the son of Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, he says that we saw that the Ja'fariya and our predecessors had already narrated before the event what demonstrates the imamat of al-Hasan. That is a report quoted from Abu Abdullah Sadiq alayhi salam, who said, when three names follow one another, Muhammad and Ali and Hassan, the fourth will be the Qa'im. So the very fact that he's using this as an argument against the Ja'fariya means that this is something that both the sects agreed upon and which was narrated before them. So again, this idea that the Qa'im would be the fourth after a Muhammad and an Ali and an Hassan, which is exactly what happened historically, again predated the actual birth of the Qa'im. So these are not things that just happened that the community then had to make up hadith in order to deal with. These are things that were predicted beforehand. So next, Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amri and the deputies. Omar claimed that the Kulaini and Nu'mani don't talk about the deputies, so therefore this means that they didn't believe in them. This is actually not the case, because we actually have Kulaini narrating in Al-Kafi from the deputies and from Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amri, for example, the first deputy, and Abu Sahl and Nawbakhti in his Tanbih also mentions the deputies. So, and this is again during the minor occultation. And we find in Al-Kafi Imam Hasan al-Askari alayhi salam narrating that Al-Amri is trustworthy to me, whatever he will deliver to you is from me. Amri and his son are trustworthy people, whatever they say to you from me, they say, listen to them and obey them because they are trustworthy and reliable people. And he also says that both during and after his life, both the Amris, Uthman ibn Sa'id and his son Uthman, are reliable. So we find that the 11th
Just letting you know you have a minute left. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We find that the 11th Imam alayhi salam explicitly endorsed the reliability of Uthman ibn Sa'id and his son. And we also find that the community was united around them, as Abu Sahl says in his tract in Tanbih. He says, and there remained from them a single man whose uprightness and trustworthiness they had agreed upon. So he ordered the people with reticence and that they are not to broadcast anything from the Imam's commands. So he explicitly orders them to kitman, or like secrecy. So you can easily explain why people during the minor occultation or Al-Kulaini, for example, or Al-Nu'mani are not explicitly writing down, hey, there's 4 deputies, these are the names. Especially when the deputy had literally ordered the people to secrecy in order to protect the identity of the Imam and his representatives. And that's it for my introduction.
Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to move into the first rebuttal round. Umar will be going ahead with his first 5 minutes. So, Umar, whenever you start speaking, I'll turn on the timer.
Okay, Bismillah. So a little bit confused about why the first 7 minutes or so was spent discussing something completely off topic, but that's fine. That is a topic that I've been interested in. So I'll kind of humor that. Couple of questions for my opponent to respond to or answer, inshallah, during his time. That would be appreciated. So first thing, the tablet, right? This emerald tablet hadith. If there was a belief. Or if the names of all the Imams were known during the lifetime of Fatima Zahra, radiallahu anha. A question that I have for my opponent now is, how come there was so much confusion about who the Imams were during the lifetimes of the 11 Imams, right? Or after Ali, right? So there was, radiallahu anh, there was a huge kind of split. Even Zurara, right, who Imam Ja'far says about Zurara, if it wasn't for Zurara, all the sayings of my father al-Baqir would have been lost, right? Even Zurara himself, who, mashallah, has such a comprehensive understanding of the ahadith of al-Baqir, rahmatullahi alayh, was unaware of who the successor of Ja'far al-Sadiq was. He sends his son, and famously we know, he sends him to Medina to find out who is the successor of Ja'far and find out that there's Musa al-Kadhib. If this was known, who the deputies are, why would he do this? Why was there so much confusion about who the Imam was after Ja'far al-Sadiq, after Ali al-Hadi, after even Hassan al-Askari, right? And we find that in Exhibit H, for example, we find that people believe that Hassan al-Askari was actually the one who went to Ghaiba. So, why is there so much confusion if there's this emerald tablet that has all the answers? What's the answer to that? My opponent sends this chain map showing that there's hadiths showing the belief in 12 imams. Again, not the topic. What I would say to this is, sure, I mean, even if we grant that there were this belief in 12 imams, which I don't believe, by the way, that's a separate debate in and of itself. Even if we grant that there was this belief in 12 imams and that there actually are 12 imams, this doesn't prove his point. But to this, I will just say that Kulaini, Saduq, and Nu'mani, they're all kind of related in the sense that they were contemporary to each other, or very close to being contemporary to each other. My opponent actually did me the favor of putting the date of their deaths. So, we can see that they were all contemporary to each other, and they lived in the same geographical area. So it wouldn't constitute true tawatur, like what we see in oftentimes in the Sunni corpus. We have somebody in Iraq compiling hadith and somebody simultaneously compiling hadith in Egypt, somebody in Hijaz. That's what I would consider to be true tawatur. If they're all contemporaries of each other, this doesn't preclude the possibility of them all kind of collaborating and concocting the same narrative. Again, that's off topic, so my opponent doesn't even have to respond to that if he doesn't want to. So regarding the fi nusrat al-Waqifa, again, kind of off topic, but since my opponent brought it up, I'd like to respond. Why would At-Tusi narrate a hadith which is contradictory to the 12-er narrative just to refute it? Well, my answer to that is because that is quite literally the definition of a straw man argument, right? You have you're debating with somebody, you have an opponent, you take their argument, their hadith, whatever, you misrepresent it, you alter it in some way, and then you tear that down, right? That's quite literally, a straw man. Those are very common, and it's not inconceivable that At-Tusi used a straw man argument. There's this belief in two ghaibas. Sure, I grant that. It's interesting that my opponent cites Abu Sahal, because this person, if my opponent would just turn his attention to Exhibit I, which I posted, Abu Sahal actually was of the belief that the 12th Imam would die in ghaiba and his son would eventually come out.
30 seconds.
So it's interesting that my opponent cites that belief. Last thing I want to say, my opponent says that I don't have enough time to address the last couple of points, but my opponent says that Kulaini mentioned or narrates from Uthman, the first deputy. Sure, and he calls him trustworthy. Yes, we know that Uthman was all 4 deputies were companions of the 11th Imam. Where does he refer to the canonical 4 deputies narrative, though? And also, which slide number is he referring to in that from Al-Kafi? I see that, but not, yeah. I don't see which slide is from Al-Kafi.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sabrina, with your rebuttal. 5 minutes.
Okay. So the first thing that Omar mentioned is if the Imams were known, why was there confusion? Well, the number 12 Imams were known, but the exact identities of the Imams were obviously not known and broadcast to the general Shia populace for the purposes of protecting their lives. Because if the successors were known, obviously they would be targeted, as we believe that all of the Imams were assassinated. Regarding the Zurara not knowing who the next Imam was, this is false, and I've put a hadith in my evidence channel which shows that the Imam actually explicitly refuted the idea that Zurara didn't know who the successor to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam would be, and actually he was just sending his son to get permission to reveal who that Imam would be. So the Imam himself has explicitly refuted this. And Omar didn't exactly understand why I was bringing up these chain maps about the 12 Imams and the Ghaibatain, so let me explain that. What I'm trying to establish is that the doctrine of the Mahdi going into occultation twice and being the 12th and final Imam is something that predates the historical Ghaiba. So this narrative cannot be something that was a historical back projection that was invented because of the circumstances of time. Since the 11th Imam died without a son, then we had to, come up with the doctrine of the occultation. And then since the 4th deputy died without leaving an heir, then we had to come up with the doctrine of the major occultation. Like all of this stuff was actually predicted beforehand. And we know that because of these chain maps that go back early. And even if, as my opponent tried to dismiss and Nu'mani and Saduq's like chain maps by claiming that they could have been collaborating together to fabricate. So first of all, this is not relevant because we're trying to establish orthodoxy, and it's trying to say that if the 4 deputies are false, then the 12 orthodoxy is false. But this isn't about precluding possibilities. It's about showing early beliefs among the Shia. And we also have Abu Sahel, who was writing during the minor Ghaiba, referring to the 2 Ghaibas, and we have the Waqifis writing in their hadith books, also predating the Ghaiba, about that there would be 2 Ghaibas and that the Mahdi would go into occultation and that there would be 12 Imams. As for Tusi allegedly strawmanning, nobody, I asked Omar for this before, for a single example of a scholar fabricating hadith, attributing them to another sect, and then writing a book refuting those fabricated hadith. It makes absolutely no sense. And if he wanted to fabricate hadith, support the Shia narrative, and then refute them, why would he fabricate hadith that actually contradict the Shia narrative? Like the 7th Imam being the Qaim, for example. It makes absolutely no sense to any sensible individual. And as for Abu Sahel believing that the 12th Imam died in Ghaiba, this comes from Ibn al-Nadhim, who's writing this. It doesn't come from the writings of Abu Sahel himself that have reached us, so there's no way of verifying this. And even if we say that he believed this, again, it doesn't show anything because he doesn't appeal to hadith to say that the Imam would die during his Ghaiba, while he does appeal to hadith regarding the 2 Ghaibas that would occur. And we also have hadith pre-existing the 2 Ghaibas, that there would be 2 Ghaibas that occur. So again, what I'm trying to establish, the hadith in Al-Kafi that I referenced, you can go to the slide saying Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amri during Imam al-Askari's time, and the slide saying Uthman ibn Sa'id as deputy. And what we find is that even people who refuse to accept the deputy status of the 2nd deputy also recognize the 1st deputy. So we have Ahmad ibn Hilal al-Karhi, companion of the 11th Imam, who writes, I did not hear the Imam designate Abu Ja'far, the 2nd deputy, for the agentship, but I do not deny his father. So if this is, again, a Shi'i fabrication, they would have made it in favor of both of the deputies, right? But this is actually claiming that one of the deputies is false, but that he acknowledges that the 1st deputy was vouched for by the Imam himself. So again, we have a number of authentic hadith which explicitly endorse the 1st and 2nd deputies. The Imam says explicitly in these wordings that before my death and after my death, that they're reliable. And we don't see this kind of endorsement for anybody else, either during the lifetime of the 11th Imam or even predating him. So very obviously, this is meant to convey a special status to us, and it is for this reason that the early Shia gathered around these individuals. And it's for this reason that we see Abu Sahel writing that the Shia community was united regarding their accepting of hidden agents' trustworthiness and reliability.
All right, that's it for your 5 minutes. There's a second round of the rebuttal. So go ahead, Omar, 5 minutes. And yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Bismillah. So just kind request to my opponent, inshallah, when he references evidences presented in the slides document, if you could just tell me what slide number. If he wants, he can unmute right now and just tell me which slide number the Hadith al-Kafi he's referring to. You don't have to though if you don't want to.
13.
14, sorry?
13.
13, okay. So slide 13. Oh, there's no screenshot of it. Okay, that's why I missed it. I also posted, okay, so regarding the whole Tulsi thing, right? And again, I hesitate to go further and further into that because it is not relevant specifically to the debate. Okay, so in slide 13, this is a bunch of hadith from Mu'jam al-Hadith al-Mu'tabara, which I believe is a very late book. It's like contemporary almost.
If you go to the third hadith listed there, it's from Al-Kafi.
Okay. Oh, it's from Al-Kafi. Okay. I have to read it. Sorry. Would have been helpful if you included a screenshot for this in the slides like you did for the other hadith. Could have read it before. Yeah, I mean, okay, so Uthman bin Sa'd was Al-Amri was a companion of the Imam. So sure, and he makes, indicates to the people that, he's going to have some sort of authority after the death of the Imam. I'm not disputing the deputyship of the first Imam. I'm disputing the entire narrative as a whole, right? So Al-Kulaini was contemporary to all four deputies, right? He neglects to mention any of them, all of them, right? He does mention Uthman, sure. And again, even the evidence which you cited, Ahmed bin Hilal, he does not dispute the first deputy. He starts to dispute the later deputies, right? So as a narrative, and this is actually very consistent with what I'm saying, which is that the narrative of the four deputies, the canonization of this, exactly four deputies and no more after, and there are these specific people, that was in crystallization. That was still in the process of being agreed upon by the inventors of the 12er religion. It wasn't until a few years after, or a few decades after the passing of the fourth deputy, that there was this kind of ijma' on this issue. And that's evidenced by, perfect. Thank you, Silverado, for citing that narration from Ahmed bin Hilal, where he says, I don't dispute his father, but I do dispute him, right? So the fact that there was sort of this dispute over who are the later deputies just, further proves my point. And actually, you can see if my opponent reads the whole narration towards the end of it, which he cites, there's kind of this. I think the third deputy kind of responds to that accusation of not recognizing second deputy as like, oh, the Imam has issued like a curse on you. I believe that came up during my research. My opponent can correct me if I'm wrong during this time, but so this kind of back and forth, we can see that there was an attempt to discredit Ahmed bin Hilal for just saying, hey, I haven't seen any proof for his deputyship. And then the third deputy, who again, I don't believe in the 12th Imam. I don't believe that this came from the Imam. I believe this was the words of the third deputy himself, says, oh, the Imam has excommunicated you from 12erism for denying the second deputy. As for why would Tulsi use a straw man? Tulsi would use a straw man. Tulsi would narrate that. Okay, so when you straw man an argument, obviously you're going to cite something which differs from you in some way, right? So Tulsi citing from Fi Nusrat al-Waqifa is a hadith which contradicts the 12-verb point of view. That's how you do a straw man, right? You cite somebody who disagrees with you, but it's a straw man version of the argument. It's a weaker version. It's a misrepresentation, and so it's easier to kind of beat down, right? So that's the answer to that. Why would Tulsi narrate something which contradicts the narrative? Well, obviously, if you're going to refute an opponent, obviously they have to differ from you in some way. If the belief in the okay, so my opponent's response to my kind of argument from silence was that the deputies were ordered to be silent. Well, if the deputies were ordered to be silent about their identities, then how come Al-Tusi comes out and discusses exactly? Sorry, how much time? Is that it?
Yeah, I was done, right? Yeah. If you need any couple more seconds, I can give you that, but that's about it.
Okay, yeah, real quick.
Okay.
Why? If you're going to say it's to protect their identities, the deputies were already dead by the time of Nu'mani's writing Kitab al-Ghaiba. According to, we know when Nu'mani lived and died, according to the agreed upon opinion of when he wrote the book is well after the death of the 4 deputies.
Okay. All right, guys, we're approaching, the end of the debate or towards the middle. So anyways, Sister Rada, go ahead with your 5 minutes. I'll begin it now.
Okay, so Omar mentioned why does Tusi talk about the deputies if they're supposed to be hidden? Well, Tusi was writing long after the deputies were dead, so it was no longer necessary to protect their identity. And he said that the narrative and canonization of the 4 deputies was in crystallization. Well, yes, because the 4 deputies were being appointed one after the other, right? So people who were living during one deputy's time did not already know there will be 2 more deputies after this guy, and these are their names, but rather every single deputy. So the first 2 deputies, Uthman ibn Sa'id and Muhammad ibn Uthman, had explicit tawthiq given to them by Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, who explicitly vouches for them even after his death. So you very rarely see this kind of tawthiq given to any ashab of the Imam, but it's very significant that it's given to these 2 who would go on to be deputies. He also, in a hadith, mentions that, so the hadith in which he says, he's the trustworthy man of the past and my man of trust in my lifetime and after my death, in my evidence section. And then the hadith in which he says that, in which he shows Uthman ibn Sa'id, the 12th Imam alayhi salam, and he says, this is your Imam and after me and my caliph over you. And he says, accept from Uthman what he says and obey his order and accept his word, because he's the vicegerent of your Imam. So I posted that as well in my evidences section. So what you see from this is that Uthman ibn Sa'id and Muhammad ibn Uthman were already vouched for during the lifetime of the 11th Imam alayhi salam. They saw the 12th Imam alayhi salam and they were accepted as having seen him, and they were accepted by the Shia community at a large because of the fact that they had been vouched for by the 11th Imam alayhi salam. Now, as for Ahmad ibn Hilal denying the Muhammad ibn Uthman, what's relevant to note is that he acknowledges that the community at large was saying that Muhammad ibn Uthman had succeeded his father. So we do see that the majority of the Shia were in agreement that Muhammad ibn Uthman was the successor of his father. And this is also proven by the fact that we have reports that the letters that were issued during the time of Muhammad ibn Uthman and Uthman ibn Sa'id were in the same handwriting that they were issued during the time of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. So what does that mean? It means that Muhammad ibn Uthman was the one who was writing the letters from the time of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, when he was writing under his father, to his father's own deputyship when he was writing under him, to when he was writing himself during his own deputyship for on behalf of himself for the Imam. So we find is that each of the after Muhammad ibn Uthman, he gave nas to Hussein ibn Ruh, and there's countless evidence for this in the hadith in Tusi's Ghaiba, and this is something that's undisputed. There's nobody else who claimed that they had nas from Muhammad ibn Uthman other than Hussein ibn Ruh, and after Hussein ibn Ruh, Ali ibn Muhammad al-Samuri. So don't claim that the 11th Imam ﷺ said that there will be 4 deputies after me. The first of them is Uthman ibn Sa'id, the second will be Muhammad ibn Uthman, the third will be Hussein ibn Ruh, and so on. What he did was he appointed the first 2, or he appointed the first and made clear the tawthiq of the first 2. The first was succeeded by his son, the second was succeeded by Hussein ibn Ruh, and the third was succeeded by Ali ibn Muhammad. And as for Nu'mani being, why did Nu'mani mention them? Well, Nu'mani was alive during the period of the last deputy. So it is still significant to protect was still significant at that time to protect their identities. And as for Kulaini, who was also alive during the minor ghaiba, we actually have him narrating explicitly from the deputies. So in Kamal ad-Din, there's a narration where he narrates from the second deputy, Muhammad ibn Uthman, and then in Al-Kafi, as I already showed, he explicitly narrates the tawthiq of Uthman ibn Sa'id and his son, both during and after his lifetime, which again shows you that Kulaini believed that these 2 were legitimate deputies of the of Imam alayhi salam. And that naturally means that the other 2 were also legitimate deputies because they were the only legitimate claimants to successorship. There were no other claimants. You can mention others like Shalmaghani or whatever, but Shalmaghani was appointed by Hussein ibn Ruh. So if you want to say that Shalmaghani was a deputy, you have to say that Hussein ibn Ruh was first. So again, all of these evidences add on each other and show that the Shia Orthodox narrative actually does make sense as a continuous whole from the existence of 12 Imams and the belief in the occulted Mahdi all the way through the 4 deputies. And Omar has been trying to improve this paradigm to show that it's not possible, but has not done that as of yet.
Okay, perfect. So we finish now from the rebuttals. We now enter the cross-examination. So the cross-examination, as I said, are going to be 20 minutes. So in the beginning, the cross-examination will be led for 10 minutes by Omar. And then Silverado, he will lead the second round of the cross-examination for 10 more minutes. So yeah, go ahead and maintain, let others speak. You guys don't speak over each other. These kinds of basic rules. So go ahead, Omar.
Okay. You started the timer?
Wait, no, 1 second, actually, yeah. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so again, I feel like we're going to get into this whole taqiyya issue of, what, because fundamentally, right, the answer to my challenge, Silverado, that you're proposing, the challenge being, give an alternate hypothesis as to why Nu'mani and Kulaini are silent on the 4 deputies narrative is, oh, well, it was taqiyya, right? They're trying to protect the identities of the deputies and all that. I posted, so a couple of things, right? So first of all, if you look at my evidence channel, the last thing that I posted was an Orientalist. It's from the same book that it's from that very same book that Exhibit G gives the reference, right? But an Orientalist kind of dates Nu'mani's writing to be around 342 AH. And the 4th deputy died in 329 AH. So yes, Nu'mani, maybe was a child or a baby around the time that the 4th deputy died, sure, but certainly, or a young adult, but certainly, I don't think that you would claim that Kitab al-Ghaiba was written contemporary to the 4th deputy. Is that what you're asserting?
No, what I'm saying is that we're trying to show that this is inconsistent from within the Shi'i paradigm, right? So you're saying that it cannot be that these people were actually legitimate deputies, and your argument from silence, but it doesn't work from the Shi'i perspective because we explicitly have Abu Sahel saying that the deputy ordered to silence. So like when we literally have a report from within the minor occultation saying that the people were ordered to silence, obviously you would expect that even for time afterwards, people would be secretive about the identities of the deputies.
Why would you expect for a time afterwards for people to be silent? Like, what's the goal? What's the goal of being silent afterwards?
Protecting the identity of the Imam.
But the Imam is in Ghaiba.
Yes. Nu'mani was alive during the period of the last deputy. So
correct.
What is the evidence that he wrote Kitab al-Ghaiba after the 4th deputy had died?
I think based on his age and his date of birth. Like it's unlikely that he was still a student of Khomeini, I think, up until Khomeini's or the fourth deputy's death. So it's unlikely that he was authoring books on his own prior to that.
Is that unlikely?
Okay, sure. I mean, you can grant it, but then the answer. Okay, so if you're going to say that the Orientalist is wrong, and in fact, Al-Ghaiba was written prior to the passing of the fourth deputy, my question becomes, why then did Khomeini mention the first two deputies in his book? Like, why is there this? Why is the student of Na'mani having this kind of secrecy, but then Khomeini mentions the first deputy? What happened to secrecy there? Why is there this inconsistency in the Taqiyya narrative again?
There's no inconsistency because Khomeini does not explicitly say, hey, these two are the deputies of the Imam. What he says is that they have tawthiq from the 11th Imam both before and after his death. So Shia at that time would understand naturally that Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amri and his son were claiming to represent the Imam, and then they would see these hadith that they're actually vouched for by the 11th Imam. So that means that what they're claiming is true. Al-Khomeini himself does not explicitly say in Al-Kafi, these are the deputies of the Imam and they're claiming to be his representatives. So there's no contradiction in the Taqiyya there.
Right. So the claim is that the Abbasids, could have had possession of, Khomeini's works and Nu'mani's works, and that's why they're trying to protect the deputies. Is that your claim? So Rado?
That if it was circulated widely that these people were claiming to be the deputies, then they would be in danger, yes. And we have hadith, for example, explicitly of like Hussein ibn Ruh doing taqiyya in the Abbasid court. Let me send the hadith for that.
Right, but Nu'mani certainly was not contemporary to the first deputy. The first deputy died, I think his deputyship only lasted 2 years. So he certainly could have mentioned at least the first deputy in Kitab al-Ghaiba, right? I mean, if you look at Exhibit A, he had the perfect opportunity to. He literally mentions, during the Ghaiba, the Imam's going to communicate via deputies. Why not just mention, okay, and the first of them is so-and-so. He's dead. Like, who was he protecting a dead person from?
His son, who was claiming to be the second deputy, and his successor, Hussein ibn Ruh. So, like, revealing the identity of the first deputy, even though the first deputy is dead, is obviously going to endanger the second deputy. Because if you know who the first deputy is, then people will ask, okay, who did this guy appoint as his successor? And then, of course, they'll come to the conclusion that it was Muhammad ibn Uthman.
But couldn't the same, just regress that logic one step? If you know who the 11th Imam is, wouldn't you know who it's like, you're saying basically if you know the identity of the person appointing, if person A appoints person B, right, and person A is dead, if you know the identity of person A, you can identify person B. That's your logic right now, right? So couldn't you just apply that with, instead of person A and person B being Uthman and his son, couldn't it be Hassan al-Askari and Uthman?
I don't see what you mean. What do you mean by that? Like,
sorry. Your logic right now is that if Nu'mani mentioned, so again, this is all, by the way, this is all contingent on Al-Ghaiba being written during the lifetime of the fourth deputy or the third deputy, which again is unlikely given the dates, but whatever, we'll grant that. If you're saying that Nu'mani did not mention who the first deputy was, because even though he was dead, he was certainly dead, but certainly the first deputy was dead by the time of the writing of Al-Ghaiba by Nu'mani. You're saying that if he mentioned who the first deputy was, then they would have been able to find out who the second deputy was, even though the first deputy was dead. So, I mean, how would they have gone and interrogated a dead body, or how exactly does that work? They would just ask around?
If his own children are alive, right, and people are the memory of him is around, people who knew him are around, you can ask his associates, you can try to find out who did this guy appoint as his successor. Like, it just puts the deputy in unnecessary risk to mention who the first deputy was.
Okay, so was it known? So why couldn't they have done that with Al-Askari, right? Find out who Al-Askari's contemporaries were, find out who his companions were. In fact, Khomeini according to you, in a very clear manner, for your, that's your argument, right? Khomeini made it very clear that Uthman bin Sa'ad has a very, clear distinction from the rest of the companions, and that, he has tawthiq even after his death. this kind of clear, appointment of the first deputy, according to you, wouldn't that cause the same endangerment?
How would that cause the same endangerment when he's not claiming that this guy is the representative of the Imam and he knows his location?
So you're saying that Kulaini was not explicit in his appointment of the first deputy, in his narration of the last deputy.
Uthman ibn Sa'id is reliable, as is his son, that they are truthful and reliable both during and after Imam Hassan al-Askari's death. So in order to get from that he would be the deputy, you have to know that Uthman ibn Sa'id was calling to his deputyship and that he was recognized as a deputy.
I see. So couldn't the same logic be applied to the second deputy, right? Like unless the Abbasids had knowledge that the second deputy was calling to his deputyship, you couldn't identify him as being a deputy.
If you know that Imam has a deputy, then you can follow that. You can ask that deputy's associates and try to find out who his successor was.
Okay, so I'm sorry, maybe you answered this before. I forgot. Why could that not be applied to al-Askari? Like, why couldn't we just find out who his associates were and from there extrapolate who the deputy is?
Because his associates does not mean anything about people like representing his son or again, if you don't know that Uthman ibn Sa'id is claimed to be a deputy, then you have no reason to suspect that he knows where the 12th Imam is or that he's in contact with the 12th Imam. All you know is that he was vouched for by the 11th Imam.
Okay, so one other thing I kind of, well, before I say that actually, you can respond to this, you don't have to, but I'm just saying this for the audience. I feel like you're trying to have your cake and eat it too, where you're trying to say, well, hang on, if you know X information, it'll be very easy to find out the rest, right? So if you know who the first deputy is, it'll be very easy to find out who the second deputy is. But then at the same time, you're not being consistent with that with al-Askari, meaning if you know who the 11th Imam is, then you know who the deputy is, right? It just, I feel like this is
not necessarily succeeded by deputy, right? The very idea that there is a deputy who's representing the Imam is not something that was publicized by the Shia to the non-Shia. So just by knowing
does mention.
Yes, but just knowing that this guy was reliable does not tell you anything about there being deputy and this guy being the deputy. But knowing that there was a deputy and this guy is a particular deputy, then you can investigate his companions, you can investigate his children, and you can try to find out from there. And it puts the second deputy in unnecessary risk.
I wasn't at the end of my time.
So that's it for the opening statement. I mean, not the opening statement, the cross-examination. So now, Sabadi, go ahead. Yeah, I know. He has his 10 minutes. Yeah, so Sabadi, you can go ahead with your cross-examination.
So my first question for Omar would be, he's claiming that since the 4 deputies were canonized later and they were written in the sense that they were first written about and mentioned explicitly in order that these are the 4 deputies after they had already died. My question would then be, what about the canonization of the Quran, in that our earliest manuscripts of the Quran come from after the Uthmanic standardization? So does this mean that the Quran was not understood to be the same before the Uthmanic standardization?
No, I wouldn't. I don't believe that logic follows with the canonization of Quran. So are you just to clarify, are you trying to discredit the entire argument of silence kind of asl?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that if you're saying that since there's no book written during the lifetime of the deputies that says these are the 4 deputies and these are their names and this is their order, that means that there is no system of deputies. Does the absence of a Quran before the Uthmanic standardization mean that the Quran was fabricated by Uthman?
No, I don't believe that logic follows. They're not analogous. And the reason why What would be more analogous, for example, is we have people writing books about the Quran, or there's mentions of the Quran in between the Uthmanic canonization and the Prophet ﷺ, and those evidences, those references to the Imam completely, to references to the Quran completely neglect to mention like Surah Kawthar or like some random surah, right? That would be analogous. That would be an argument from silence. So there simply being an absence of a manuscript from that time is not sufficient for saying that the Quran didn't exist. Like in my example,
How do we know?
Yeah.
What was written before the Uthmanic canonization, which mentioned that this is the Quran, these are the 114 chapters of it, and this is how it was revealed.
Because the Quran has true tawatur, not like that tawatur of the chains that you presented, where they're all kind of compiled by people who live within 15 miles of each other. We have true tawatur across the entire Islamic world of the Quran.
Okay, so then you're appealing to the idea that these mutawatir chains are fabricated regarding the deputies. But again, you're arguing from the Shia, you have to argue from the Shia paradigm that this is impossible, right? Because in order to disprove the occultation and thereby disprove the Shia narrative, you have to prove that it is not possible for this to have been the case. So what proves that it is not possible that these 4 deputies were in fact recognized by the Shia as the deputies and succeeded one another, and the first 2 had approval from the Imam?
Okay, I'll answer that, but could I just, if you give me permission, could I respond to the first comment you made about tawatur of the 4 deputies?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what tawatur are you appealing to regarding the 4 deputies? You said
I was referring to the hadith about the 12 imams and the 2 ghaibas and the hidden birth, not the.
Right. So I'm not being inconsistent there, right? When I appeal to Quranic tawatur, that's legitimate. Then I'm not being inconsistent with rejecting any kind of tawatur with regards to the 4 deputies. Just to make that clear to the audience.
You were rejecting the tawatur regarding the 2 ghaibas and the birth of the Mahdi in secret and the necessity of the divine authority.
I mean, again, that's not the topic of the debate. And the tawatur of the Quran is it's like comparing a Lamborghini to a 1995 Toyota Corolla. When you talk about the tawatur of the Quran versus the alleged tawatur of 12 infallible imams or whatever, we can I would love to, if you'd like to, I'd love to have a debate on the origins of this 12 imams narrative. But again, that's not the focus of today's debate. With regards to,
because if we demonstrate that this pre-existed the existence of the actual 12th Imam and the historical happenings of the occultation, then that means that this was not a historical back projection, right? This is not something that was written afterwards, that was just created in order to explain what coincidentally happened to happen. But this is actually something that was believed by the Shia before the actual occultation. This is something that people were expecting to some extent, and therefore this is not some like fabrication like you're trying to paint it out to be.
Right. I mean, again, the 12 imams is a separate topic in and of itself, and I'd love to get into it. I just don't have time in this exact debate to do that. But even if I grant, Silverado, right, to answer your question, even if I grant that has true tawatur, which it doesn't, but even if I grant that it has true tawatur and it it's very robust and this belief of 12 imams, so on and so forth, that still doesn't get you to where you want with the deputies. It's like with the Sa'ad ibn Ubadah question in the last debate. That doesn't get you to what you're trying to prove for the debate, right? Like there's been tawatur about 12 imams, doesn't prove tawatur of 4 deputies.
What it proves is that the Mahdi was born in secret and that he was occulted, and that he would have 2 different occultations, and that in itself proves the Shia narrative. By the way, the deputies are just they're not critical to the Shia narrative in that sense, but they are vouched for by the 11th Imam. So that is what proves that they're deputies.
Right, but that's not tawatur, right? So when it comes to your comparison of Quran versus my alleged rejection of tawatur, I'm not rejecting any tawatur with the 4 deputies. There is no tawatur on that issue of the 4 deputies. I'm not being inconsistent there.
Well, there was general acceptance of the Shia community around the four deputies and the fact that they had been recognized during the 11th Imam's time as being reliable.
So, I mean, there's general acceptance of Jesus Christ being the Son of God. That doesn't make it true.
But
by Christians.
The companions of the 11th Imam recognized that Uthman ibn Sa'id had been given tawthiq by the 11th Imam. And it's for this reason that Abu Sahal says that the people had remained from them a single man whose uprightness and trustworthiness they had agreed upon. So again, everybody is agreeing on the trustworthiness of Uthman ibn Sa'id, even people who rejected later deputies. So there's a consensus of the Shia community and the people who knew the 11th Imam that this man, Uthman ibn Sa'id, who was in charge of the financial institutions and the agentship of under the lifetime of the 11th Imam, continued to represent the Imam during the lifetime of the 12th Imam.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure what the issues with 12ers, right? You feel like you can prove 25% of it and then the rest just follows. Same thing with like if I prove Imam Ali, then all 11 others follow from that. You prove the first, sure, great, right? I had narration for the first. That you still have 3 more deputies to prove. For the debate is about the 4 deputies. Like, okay, you proved the first.
There's no contention among the Shia community regarding who those deputies were. Like, there's hadith of Nas for all of them. There's hadith of letters arriving. Like, there's nothing.
In fact, that's not true.
There's nothing theologically problematic about there being more than these 4 deputies. So there's no reason for the Shia to just make up that these 4 were the only 4 deputies. But we don't have reports, first of all, of letters coming from anyone other than these 4 deputies. We don't have reports of the Shia community gathering around other than these 4 deputies. We don't have reports of other than these 4 being given explicit tawthiq by the Imam as his representative.
In fact, that couldn't be further from the truth. You yourself, I didn't even have to bring it. I was going to bring it, but you yourself brought the narration of Ahmad bin Hilal rejecting who does he
claim is the deputy instead?
He doesn't know, but and again, there's other claims. Ibn Nusayr claims to be a deputy. Shalmaghani claims to be a deputy.
Shalmaghani was appointed by Hussein ibn Ruh, so that doesn't follow at all. Like, Shalmaghani was not claiming to have been appointed by Muhammad ibn Uthman, or to like, his appointment came from Hussein ibn Ruh, allegedly. Then he started to claim that he was an independent deputy. So again, and the Shia community did not gather around him as they gathered around the other deputies. So again, appealing to like an exception like Ahmad ibn Ishaq or Ahmad ibn Hilal is not prove that the general community did not gather around these deputies. In fact, Ahmad ibn Hilal acknowledges that the general consensus was that Muhammad ibn Uthman was the successor of Uthman ibn Sa'id. He just says, I have not seen evidence for Muhammad ibn Uthman being appointed. But we know from other hadith, from others, companions of Uthman ibn Sa'id, companions of the 11th Imam alayhi salam, that he was in fact appointed. So Ahmad ibn Hilal, not knowing that Muhammad ibn Uthman was appointed, says nothing about that there were other deputies, there were other claimants to the deputyship.
No, so my point in bringing those examples up is to dispute your point, right? You made a very inaccurate point about there kind of being this kind of pseudo ijma, or like, everyone kind of just won with the 4 deputies narrative. That couldn't be further from the truth. There's pandemonium. In fact, in Firaq al-Shia by al-Nawbakhti, he cites 14 different sects that emerged after the death of al-Askari, ranging from beliefs that al-Askari is actually the one who went into Ghaiba, to beliefs like from Abu Sahal, who would say that, or the, according to you, the person who narrates from Abu Sahal, that the 12th Imam is going to die in Ghaiba and his son is going to come out. A range of this pandemonium. Nobody knows what's going on. Shalmaghani is out here claiming to be a deputy. Ibn Nusayr is claiming to be a deputy, and then he claims to be God. There's a grandson of one of the deputies claiming to be the 5th deputy. There's utter pandemonium at this time. So ijma, or this kind of peaceful agreement on the same narrative, it couldn't be further from.
Even though there were splinter sects during the lifetimes of the Imams as well. But the majority group was the group that believed in the imamat of these 12 imams and the deputyship of these 4 deputies. And have, for example, Abu Hassan al-Ashari, who says, and he died during the minor ghaiba, he says that the majority of the Shia believe that Al-Hassan ibn Ali explicitly designated the imamat of his son, and he is the hidden, awaited one, according to those who claim he will reappear and fill the earth with justice. So yes, there were these splinter groups, but again, there was still an orthodoxy. And the existence of splinter groups does not disprove the claim of the orthodox group.
Right. So, I mean,
wait, I actually gave you guys even an extra minute to finish up. Yeah, if you really need to mention a point, you can inshallah discuss it in the informal discussion, open discussion VC later. Okay, so with that, I think we move now to the final part of the debate, which is the conclusions. Actually, so yeah, we have conclusions, then we still have the Q&A. So inshallah, it's going to be quick, 5 minutes for Amar, 5 minutes for Silverado, and then we're going to move for the Q&A. Just a reminder, guys, post your questions in the Q&A chat, and please let the questions be at least in a broader sense about the topic. They don't have to be exactly about like specific points, but it has to be related to what we're debating today. Don't ask about istighatha or any of these silly points. So yeah, but go ahead, Omar, with your conclusion.
Start the. Hello?
Yeah, I'm sorry, as soon as you speak.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Just to quickly address the last couple of points that were mentioned in that cross-examination point. Again, subhanAllah, like, we came to a topic that is so critical to the debate. I actually didn't get to mention this in my opening statement, but I'm glad my opponent brought it up. There was pandemonium in the Imami community after the death of Al-Askari. Nobody kind of knew what happened. And that's why this argument from silence is so powerful. Because against this backdrop of pandemonium, 14 sects, according to Firaq al-Shia by al-Nawbakhtiyya, 14 sects splinter off, right? And instead of, Nu'mani and Kulaini coming and kind of reeling everyone to hang on, guys, the Imam left us with somebody, in charge. There's these 4 canonical deputies who kind of, we should all abide by. Al-Nu'mani is just completely silent on the deputy. My opponent claims that it's because of some kind of, again, subhanAllah, when you talk to others, it's always the same thing, taqiyya, to protect the identities of the deputies, right? I just posted 2 more scans from that same book. Another example. I could have brought, I don't know how many, but I remember in my research, so many, more than I could count, examples of false claimants to deputyship. I don't want to, exaggerate, but, inshallah, maybe after the debate, I can bring you 20 examples. People who claimed deputyship in this, just off of the PDF that I have open on my computer right now. I gave example of one more, Ja'far ibn Ahmad. If you look at the bottom of the page, footnote 74 and 75, claimed to be the 5th deputy. So again, the furthest thing from, ijma or like peace, and like everyone knew, the Imam made it very abundantly clear, and the majority of Shia surrounded around the same narrative. The majority sect may or may not have ended up winning. I haven't, done the math on like who believed what, and whether the orthodox, the people who believed in the canonical 4 deputies, in fact, had the majority at the time. According to my opponent, Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari claims that there were that the majority believes in the 12th Imam and were correct. Islam is not a majority vote religion, right? If you look at the majority of Sunnis, the majority of Muslims or people who are at least Muslim in the dunya, since my opponent says that we're kuffar in the akhirah, but the majority of Muslims in the dunya, don't believe that Imam Ali is an infallible Imam. So if we go based on majority, does that mean that we're right? Obviously not. Again, like last time in the last debate, my opponent's central argument or central rebuttal to my argument was taqiyya, right? Why did Imam Ali give bay'ah? It was taqiyya to kind of for whatever reason. Same thing happening here, right? why is Nu'mani why is Nu'mani silent on who the deputies are? Exhibit A, he has the perfect opportunity to mention, he goes through, he mentions the roles and responsibilities of the deputies during the ghaiba. He doesn't mention that. He doesn't mention who they are. He doesn't even, to my knowledge, he doesn't even mention four. He says, during the ghaiba, it's these kind of four deputies who are in charge. I believe this, and later attempts to kind of canonize these four, I believe, are a back projection to kind of back up Nu'mani's statement. So Nu'mani is the one who kind of propagates this narrative, and people want to, it was a work in progress, and Nu'mani, they wanted to give a narrative that was consistent with what Nu'mani kind of sent or wrote about. To conclude, I think my opponent's response to why Nu'mani neglected to mention the four deputies, it's because he wanted to protect the identities of the deputies. Well, he certainly wasn't contemporary with the first and maybe the second. That much is for sure. Why didn't he mention those? Because somehow apparently the Abbasids could have gone and interrogated the companions of the first deputy to find who the second, third, fourth, fifth, or second, third, fourth were, and then from that way find the location of the 12th Imam. Hang on, I thought the 12th Imam is invisible, right? So like if it's that easy to find him just by finding the deputy, because apparently according to the narrations you could see him point blank and not recognize that he's the Imam. He goes for Hajj every year. He went for Hajj, during COVID when only a couple of thousand people were there. Why didn't they find him there? I said, well, okay, fine. Your answer is going to be because Allah miraculously hid him. So why can't Allah miraculously hide him even if people identified who the first, second, third deputies were? I don't know. It doesn't quite add up to me. I think the argument from silence is very compelling, and we can clearly see that the narrative starts with less details and goes to more details towards the end during the time of Tusi, where he very explicitly says, no, these are exactly who the deputies are. And that kind of progression of details is a classic example of construction of an a posteriori construction of a narrative, back propagation of beliefs.
Okay, so that's it for Amr. Go ahead, Silverado, and just a reminder, guys, after this there'll be a Q&A. Go.
Okay, so to conclude, my point overall was to show that actually the belief in the 12 Imams, the belief in the occulted Mahdi, the belief in the two ghaibas, all of this predated the actual historical happenings of the two ghaibas, of the birth of the 12th Imam, of the death of the 11th Imam without an apparent heir, and so on. So we know that these, and we can reliably establish based on these chain maps and so on, that these, and works that we know were written during the minor ghaiba and even before that, during the time of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam and the Waqifis, we can establish that the Shia had these beliefs circulating among them. Now, how do we account for splinter sects and confusion when the ghaiba started? Well, naturally, even if people knew of hadith that there would be two ghaibas, this was an unprecedented event in the history of Shiism. So it is only natural that one would expect that people would be confused and perplexed and not know exactly what's going on now that for the first time in Shia history there is no apparent Imam, and there's this unprecedented case of a non-member of Ahlul Bayt who is now acting as the representative of the Imam who one has to go through. However, we do see that this gradual preparation towards the ghaiba in the lives of the later Imams. Like, for example, we see the development of the system of the Wakala, during which there becomes like a financial system that can survive without the Imam's direct presence for receiving khums and zakat and so on. And we also see that in the lifetimes of the 10th and 11th Imams, most of the way that they communicated with their followers were through letters. So again, this is to prepare them for the eventual lack of an Imam. And then when it comes to the four deputies, what we find is that Uthman ibn Sa'id and Muhammad ibn Uthman are explicitly vouch for in a number of authentic hadith in the Shia corpus, which say that they're reliable both before and after the 11th Imam's death. And what we see is that the Shia community at large gathered around these individuals as the deputies. And their successorship is not disputed to Hussein ibn Ruh and Ali ibn Muhammad al-Samuri. And we have hadith of Nas of them as well. So what all of this proves is that the 4 deputies did have legitimacy, and Umar's goal in this debate was to try to disprove from the Shia paradigm that this can be possible. But his argument from silence does nothing to show this, because as Abu Sahel literally wrote, that the deputy was calling to silence. So it's abundantly clear why people would not be openly advocating, this guy's the deputy of the Imam, during the minor occultation. And as for Nu'mani not mentioning the 4 deputies, again, he was alive during the lifetime of the 4th deputy, and Omar has not established that he wrote the book after the death of the 4th deputy. And we also and then Omar was talking about why Allah couldn't protect the 12th Imam. Again, these are all ways of protecting the 12th Imam. So there's a reason why the Imams, even though Allah could, for example, protect them and prolong their lives, all of these Imams had to practice taqiyya, and the deputies had to practice taqiyya, and we have explicit reports of the deputies practicing taqiyya. So all of these are ways through which Allah acts, right? But in order to conceal and protect the identity of the Imam. So the Imam's identity was protected by the taqiyya of the deputies, and the deputies all had a continuous nas going back to the 11th Imam, and were all recognized by the Shia community at large. And it was recognized that the 12th Imam had gone into ghaiba, and yeah, that's it.
We're done? Okay, perfect. I muted myself by mistake. Okay, so we're done for the conclusions. So now we move on to the Q&A. There aren't much questions because this topic is a bit new. So I'm going to be just reading the questions to whom I may concern. And yeah, so Amr, first of all, there's a question which may be a bit basic from Ahmed al-Bosniak about like what exactly is a deputy? He asked. So I guess Silvardi couldn't actually also answer this as well, and give a perspective about what is a deputy to those who may not exactly understand what a deputy is.
Right. So again, as a non-12er, I don't believe in the 12th Imam. So what I believe was the purpose of the deputy was that Imam al-Askari died without leaving behind, without an heir. Right? He didn't have any sons at the time that he died, and so the Imami community, and you have to understand, the Imami community was a very cohesive unit. They collected khums. They collected, and this was actually, when reading through the literature, that was actually the primary duty of the deputies, right? To continue to collect the khums. There's even discussions about the deputy appointing sub-deputies who would, convey the khums from other people to him. I think one of the nicknames of the first deputy was comes from the fact that he would sell oil and he would hide the khums in his oil containers or whatever. Anyways, long story short, what happened was when al-Askari died without an heir, the Imami community needed some kind of figurehead to kind of uphold the mantle. And so they already had this doctrine of father to son, except in the case of Hassan to Hussein. They didn't want to break that. They didn't want to go to another descendant of the Ahlul Bayt. Although Ja'far, son of al-Askari, did claim to be Imam, but again, not to talk the debate. They needed some kind of figurehead or leader for the Imam community. And so the deputy kind of held that position. That is the role of the deputy, to continue to manage the affairs of the Shias, kind of, use the seal of the Imam to represent the office of the Imamate, and continue, managing the khums distribution and collection, so on and so forth.
I'll just speak briefly on this. So during the lifetime of the 11th Imam, Uthman ibn Sa'id was already in charge of the Wukala system, so the financial system through which people sent khums and letters and so on to the Imam, because the 11th Imam spent most of his life in house arrest. So he was reached primarily through these Wukala. And the leader of them was Uthman ibn Sa'id. So after the 11th Imam died, he had already appointed Uthman ibn Sa'id, or he had already given tawthiq to Uthman ibn Sa'id, and Uthman ibn Sa'id and many others reported to having witnessed the 12th Imam, both before the death of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam and afterwards. So the purpose of the Safir, or the deputy, was to be the point of contact between the Shia and the Imam during the minor occultation. So he was in charge of collecting the funds, he was in charge of letters going back and forth between the Imam. So the tawqis that came from the Imam, like the letters that we have from the 12th Imam, those came through the deputies. So that's the purpose of the deputies.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's move through the questions quickly. Question for Silverado. From Elijah, he says, what purpose does it serve to have an infallible authority 24/7/365 when he's offline, inaccessible, and not reachable directly? So I'm guessing he's referring to like the 12th Imam today.
The Imam's purpose is not solely as like a Q&A resource, right? Like the Imam serves many purposes, and one of them is on a cosmological level. So for example, how the Quran says that Allah would not punish the people while you, referring to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was among them, right? So, and we find this with the cases of the previous prophets, where before Allah punishes a people, He sends the prophet out. So the explanation traditionally for why Allah has not like done what He did to Ad or Thamud, to any people since the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is because, well, Rasulullah was that hujjah for the entire world. So because of him, since he's rahmatan lil alameen, Allah basically did not punish anybody on the earth, like how He destroyed Thamud and Ad and so on. And this role is continued through the line of the Imam. So this is just one example of a role that the Imam plays. Like in the one of the tawqis of the Imams, he compares his role to the sun behind the clouds. So the light still reaches you even though you can't see it. So the Imam still has an important role in many other senses besides just being, you know, an infallible Q&A resource.
Okay. This is from Musa to you, Omar. And Musa actually wanted to post multiple questions, but I'm not sure if he's going to do this, so I'm just going to read this one. So first of all, Omar, he narrates a hadith from Bukhari. So if you can take a look at it. Zayd ibn Thabit, with the Quran was compelled, until the end. So go read that, Omar. He says, this hadith shows that not every piece of the Quran was given tawatur. How do we know which iteration of the ahruf wordings were to be accepted? Your argument is that if something is canonized later, it can't possibly be the true one. So how come you can apply this to a particular iteration of an ahruf? And he left some links there for you to see.
Okay, so I don't have time to read the links right now. Maybe you can invite Musa on stage and clarify his question. Is the question that, I mean, we believe in, I think, 7 canonical ahruf, or qira'at. I forget. It's 7, is it 10? Again, I'm not well versed on that topic. Is the question that besides the canonical ahruf that we accept now, there were other deviant ahruf existing at that time, and therefore, an argument from silence could be used to kind of prove that those ahruf are also legitimate? Is that your question?
Yeah, that's exactly my question. My question is pretty much that we have these other ahruf and qira'at floating around, but we don't know what to do with them. So, for example, we have a narration where instead of ta'am al-fajr, another wording is used, or different wordings of different verses. And in fact, there's even a hadith where they couldn't find 2 witnesses for a particular verse of the Quran. So, of course, as we all know, the common narrative goes that Uthman looked for 2 witnesses for every verse of the Quran, and that he needed to find that so that he could corroborate each verse of the Quran. However, there was one verse of the Quran which he couldn't find 2 witnesses for. So he found 1 witness for that person, and there was a funny hadith where someone narrated from the Prophet, oh, this person's witnessing is like 2 persons witnessing. So when that person witnessed that verse of the Quran, Uthman was like, okay, we'll just take it as 2 witnesses and we'll do it. So now we have all these alternate wordings and all these alternate ahruf and qira'at. And so your argument is that if these things are canonized later, that means they can't possibly be pointing towards a true orthodox canonization. So in other words, your line of logic has to concede that the Uthmanic Codex could not have been the Orthodox Codex. That's basically my argument.
Okay, so I don't even know where to start. So a couple of things. So first of all, that's not what an argument from silence is. That's actually the opposite of an argument from silence when there's extra information. An argument from silence is when there's missing information. So you're saying that there's extra qira'at that, how do we know how to deal with, how do we do an after the fact kind of canonization canonization. Again, just to exhibit F gives the argument from silence criteria, which I don't think this particular situation or ikhtilaf or confusion with regards to the Quran is Quranic ahruf, divan ahruf actually meet. The 4 criteria are: there is a document or hadith or book, right? D, extant, existing, like Kitab al-Ghaiba by An-Nu'mani, in which the event E is not mentioned. Criteria 2, it was the intention of the author of D, Nu'mani, to enumerate exhaustively all the members of class of events of which E is supposed to be a member. Meaning he writes a book literally called Kitab al-Ghaiba, right? And he has a section in it when he talks about the deputyship. 3, the author of D was acquainted with all members of the class in question. Nu'mani was literally a student of Al-Kulaini, right? 4, F must be such that if it had occurred, the author of D could not have overlooked it, right? The notion of who the deputies are, this is a central issue. No, Tusi literally says this is the primary proof. Suduq and Tusi, I believe, both say this is the primary proof of the 12th Imam to those who of the existence of the 12th Imam to those who deny it. The four deputies, right? So that's the criteria applied. If you can apply those 4 criteria to the Quran or whichever Quranic ahruf you're trying to, I guess, prove the legitimacy of, then sure, I think it would apply. But I think what you're doing is a classic misapplication of the argument from silence. And it's not rare, by the way. Like an argument from, if you read the whole paper that I sent, there's people who, and actually you're the one who brought this up to me before, Man kadhaba alayya, this famous mutawatir hadith. Join Ball kind of does a very sloppy analysis of occurrences of this hadith, and tries to make a similar kind of argument from silence of, it wasn't present in any early hadith, and he just overlooks dozens of, in fact, there's a whole paper on just missing books that he just completely neglected to look at entirely, or even books that he looked at that actually have the hadith, but he said they don't have the hadith. So it's very easy to misapply the argument from silence. I think it fits like a glove in this scenario. I don't think it applies to the Quranic ahruf example that you're referring to.
Regarding the Man Kadhaba example, the argument that Juin Boyle was making was that in, for example, Sunan-Nasa'i, that is a book that you would expect the sort of narration to be in, because it's a main canonical work. This is the same kind of argument that you also applied to Al-Kafi, for example. You said that this is a main canonical work. However, we also have examples from, number one, within Al-Kafi itself, and also from the fact that Saduq and Tusi are quoting from Kulaini, him directly corresponding with some of the deputies. For example, and also with respect to Al-Kafi, Kulaini himself in his introduction, he says that he was intending to write a bigger book than Al-Kafi, which was going to be more comprehensive and include more things. Najashi and Tusi also mentioned that Kulaini had other books, which one of which would include the Tawqis of Kulaini directly to the deputies. Now, Juin Boyle's argument is that if a hadith is not in a canonical work that would be expected to have that sort of hadith, then it has to be a fabrication by later people. Because if it weren't in there, then where else would it be? So his argument was that, okay, look, sure, Nasa'i had other books and he quoted the hadith in other books, But Jordan Boyle's argument would be that because these people are quoting it from other books, they're just fabricating it on Nasa'i. They're just fabricating on Tirmidhi. They're not actually coming at it from an authentic perspective, because Tirmidhi had access to these chains, he had access to these things, but he didn't quote it from those chains. Now, this is the same kind of argument, basically. Just to clarify, like what Jordan Boyle is saying, I think you're mischaracterizing what Jordan Boyle is saying. So yeah.
Yeah. So I would make the same accusation towards you that you're mischaracterizing what Jordan Boyle saying. I actually looked at his paper afterwards, and it's not quite as simple as I believe you're trying to make it out to be. If it's missing in a canonical book, therefore it's fabricated. He actually did an analysis, a region by region analysis. So he goes to Iraq. He didn't go there, but he looks at the books from Iraq, the earliest books from Iraq. He goes to the earliest books from Sham. He goes to the earliest books from Egypt. I believe An-Nasa'i falls into that category. I could be wrong. He goes to the earliest books from Hijaz, and he says, and he goes one by one, right? Okay, so this book is, these are the earliest books from Hijaz. It's not in Muwatta Malik, for example. Okay, he goes to Iraq. It's not in, I think it was Abd al-Razzaq al-San'ani or something. And he goes one by one, like showing. And a lot. And the funny part is, a lot of those books actually he gets wrong. I believe it may not even actually be in Sunan an-Nasa'i, but so what, right? Like what's his response? That's not how you apply argument from silence, right? The second criteria. Let's look at it again.
Guys, we don't want to turn this thing into a discussion on the stage. So, Amar, just finalize quickly your thing, and then, let's just move on.
I'll head off, and we can have that discussion later.
Yeah, inshallah, we'll have an informal discussion where I can, one-on-one with everyone, kind of thing. But the second criteria, right? It was the intention of the author of D to enumerate exhaustively all members of the class of events of which he is supposed to be a member. So if An-Nasa'i was writing a book, right, and in like the beginning introduction, he says, I'm compiling a book with all the narrations in the world, right? And he neglects it, then sure. Or he says, more appropriately, which is kind of hard. It would be hard to, write down everything. But if he says, I'm trying to compile all the narrations about, some topic that broadly covers, lying on the Prophet ﷺ, right? So some umbrella topic of which, for sure, lying on the Prophet ﷺ would be a subtopic. Then your argument would follow. That is not the case with Sunan an-Nasa'i.
Okay. All right, guys. Let's just continue with the questions real quick. So, okay, so that was Musa's question. Now, this is a question from Adam to the Salvador. He says, if the Imams, etc., did taqiyya a lot, how do you know when they are doing taqiyya and when they are not?
Okay, this opens up a lengthy other discussion that I don't necessarily want to go into, but the Imams gave us certain criteria to know when they're doing taqiyya and when they're not. Like, for example, with fiqh, when we have two contradicting hadith and they're both reaching us through equally reliable sources, let's say, the one which contradicts the view of the Sunnis, then in that case would be the hadith that said in taqiyya. And the reason for that is that's the only possibility. How can the Imam say something contrary to the Sunnis in order to do taqiyya, right? Because the Sunnis were the majority. So this is just one way of knowing when the Imams were doing taqiyya. Also, we're given other things, but again, it's kind of off topic.
Okay. All right. That's a good, quick answer. So this is it's from Elijah, but I'll ask that question later on. This is from Hashim. So Umar, he says, what does the Imami community gain from fabricating this entire storyline when it's literally brought to them? When it's literally brought them nothing but more strife and opposition and oppression. There isn't a gain in believing that the Imamis believe, and there never was one except according to the Imamis being the right sect on Yawm al-Qiyamah. We see the Waqifah who were created so that they could just keep the khums money for themselves, introducing a gain of wealth. We have the Zaydis who sought power through revolution against Bani Umayyah, etc. But the Imamis haven't gained anything in this dunya by professing 12 except oppression, death, and exile. So what was the purpose and or benefit behind fabricating such a lie?
Yeah, awesome question. Again, just like last time, Thank you for asking. This is something I wanted to expound on the debate, didn't have time for. There's an excellent book, Agents of the Hidden Imam, Forging 12 Refusal by Edmund Hayes. I can give the ISBN in chat, inshallah. Which covers exactly this question, right? You have to understand the situation that the Imami community, right? They weren't 12 at that time. The Imami community was in at that time, at the time of Al-Askari's death, right? You had this mountain of khums money, this machine sort of for collecting khums money that would be kind of distributed for the needs of the Imami community. And without the Imam, this system would fall apart, right? This community, this cohesive bond that they had with each other would fall apart. So the leaders of the community, Uthman being one of them, had a very clear motive in preserving this community. If it comes out that, oh, Al-Askari died without a son, then okay, well, that means our whole community is based on false pretense. Shiism is false or Imamism is false. What do we do now? Oh crap! How are we going to collect khums? How are we going to the institution of the imamate that Hayes kind of goes into becomes critical for the day-to-day operation of the imami community. And so that is the motive to preserve. That's why this deputyship thing was invented, right? To kind of preserve that sense of community, that office of imamate that was so critical to the community. That is the motivation. It's a great question.
Okay. So this is also again from Adam to Silverado. As you mentioned that the deputies of taqiyya as well, couldn't they have protected themselves by claiming taqiyya if their names weren't announced as being successors and written by that book? Umar is claiming has no mention of them.
Yes, they could have claimed taqiyya, but this is unnecessarily putting their lives in danger. Like, Shia community already knew who the deputies were, so there was no purpose to put explicitly in a book that was released as a public polemic who the names of the deputies were, right? Like, it's totally irrelevant to the point, and it puts them in unnecessary danger when just by being silent on the matter as the deputy himself commanded, it does so much more to protect them. And we find with the example of Shalmaghani, right? Like, he was calling to his divinity. When he was brought to court for this, he denied this, and so they brought forth his disciples, and they told them to slap him to basically prove that he wasn't teaching divinity, right? Because if he's their god, they won't slap him. So one of the guys refused to slap him and instead kissed him, saying, "You're my god." So then they're like, "Oh, so you're lying. You did claim to be their god," and they executed him. So even they could have, yes, claimed that this guy's lying on us, we're not actually the deputies, but it puts them in unnecessary danger that may not have worked. Like, there's no reason for their names to be listed in a book that was released publicly for them, and that was available to non-Shia. Like, there's absolutely no purpose for their names to be mentioned. So this argument from silence does not work at all when we know the Shia community had gathered around these people during the time of their deputyship.
Okay. So back to Elijah's question. This is also for you, Salvador. He says, you spent a major part of your debate trying to prove the timeline of the 12 infallible imams' belief, and so far Umar spent a lot of time addressing it. I feel it would be a topic much more interesting to the audience, but it felt hurried. Could you guys possibly do another? Yeah, so he says, could you guys possibly do another debate dedicated to that specific topic? Namely, how old is the belief in the 12 infallible imams specifically? I'm guessing it's not really about the topic, but it's about...
Yeah, well, I mean, you can trace it without a doubt before the existence of the 12 imams, because the hadith, like the earliest mention of it is in Kitab Sulaim, which, yes, is of dubious attribution, but regardless, it without doubt goes before the existence of the 12th imam. And then there's these chain maps that I mentioned. And I don't think it would be particularly productive, because Omar would just claim that these guys, as he did, are untrustworthy, Kulaini, Saduq, and Nu'mani. And this does nothing to address the position of Shia orthodoxy, right? Because he's supposed to prove from the Shi'i paradigm that this is not possible. the deputies could not have been legitimate. The occultation narrative was clearly a fabrication, which obviously is not proven whatsoever. So I don't think it's particularly productive just discuss, because it'll end up becoming a discussion of how reliable were Kulaini, Saduq, and Nu'mani in compiling the Usul. Were they actually, using texts that were available to them at the time, or were they just, fabricating things, which is an absurd claim, but it would just get into stuff like that.
Okay.
Okay, we can. Yeah. Okay. So moving on, I think we're approaching the last questions. And as I said, the reminder, guys, inshallah, after this, if you're willing to talk to Umar or just be in the VC, we're going to have a post-debate VC, inshallah. So, question for Umar from Super Qummi. He says, question on tahrif based on the ayat quoted, the Sahaba did tahrif. How can you justify or refute this hadith of Ibn Mas'ud? And then you bunch of the hadith there. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if this is about the topic, but
what the hell? Like, why did
irrelevant?
Yeah, it's irrelevant. I didn't know. Okay, yeah, but Qummi, you can bring this up, inshallah, in the post debate VC. So, trying to look for questions related to the thing. Okay, so why Alex says to Yusuf Rado. Salam, why were four only chosen? Why did it stop at 4 deputies when the Imam is still alive and in Ghaiba, according to the Shia?
Okay, so as was prophesied before, and as was expected by the Shia, there were going to be 2 different occultations. One, the lesser occultation, and one, the greater occultation, in which he would have no official representative, and in which people would think that he has died. So, as for the particular reason of why there needed to be a major ghaiba and why the minor ghaiba could not just prolong, that's just, I don't know a good explanation for why it necessarily had to happen that way, other than that is how the Imams had said that it would be. And this is how the Shia community were expecting it to be. And this was Allah's divine will for there to be 2 ghaibas and for the Imam to be totally concealed in his second and final ghaiba.
Okay. Amar, this is again from Hashim. He says, so the claim is that Uthman basically just kept it just kept it up to keep the khums. All right, yeah. So why don't we have a continuous chain of deputies for this? The Ismaili community, for example, has a sect that has the Zahir Imam, who represents a Hazir Imam, or Hadir Imam. Why is it that we chose to stop at 4? This lacks a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I don't. So again, I think generally, Uthman was did not get rich off of this khums thing. It was more for the community to preserve the the khums for the community. I think he was generally reliable when it comes to not going off and buying camels for his own personal pleasure with the khums money that he collected. It was more so for the community. Yes, it was among other things, the sense of leadership and the sense of kind of authority to act as a cohesive group. Those are the other reasons why, the deputyship was. Those are the other motivations for the deputyship. But yes, certainly, continuous circulation, distribution of khums was right up there as one of the biggest reasons. And then the reason why they stopped at 4 is because it would have caused too much infighting later on, or at least that's my hypothesis. I think, I forget. There was a very good example with proofs as well. That things are starting to fall apart later, and so that's why they kind of called determination to.
Can I just comment on something? According to what you're saying, Uthman ibn Sa'id fabricated this, out of the goodness of his heart, he pretended that the Imam still existed and he was collecting khums on his behalf so that he could benefit the Shia community and so that they would have continuity. If he's not doing it for personal gain, what motive does he have to do it?
It was for gain of the community, right? So, I mean, the heads of the Imami community, right, would have known that Al-Askari died without a son, right? So already, like, I don't believe that these were honest people who perpetuated this hidden Imam narrative. The whole ghaiba thing, or at least the people who ascribed a ghaiba to the 12th Imam, the people who perpetuated this thing, none of them were honest, right? They kind of came up with this thing together. I don't know that it was Uthman who elected himself, or maybe the Imami community at large just kind of elected Uthman in like maybe like a Safifa kind of way. But certainly, Uthman was one of the contenders for this position of deputyship. The hidden Imam was only one of the solutions proposed by the Imami community. The other, solution was Al-Askari going into Ghaiba. Another solution was Ja'far being the next Imam. I think there was even I remember reading like some proposals of Narjis being, some kind of authority. And this was just one, and yet the primary reason was to preserve the community, right? The Imam, I believe that certainly around the time of Jawad, right? Jawad, Hadi, Askari, the Imam became less of an independent person and more, and I'm not trying to be, offensive at all, but kind of like controlled by the communities, kind of like, I hesitate to use the word puppet because that will offend people, but kind of in that way. And so, like when you look at the Imam of Jawad, it becomes very, very clear that he was a young child raised in the Abbasid court, raised around these, and kind of monitored by Imami leadership. And so these leadership were essentially the people who had a motivation in keeping this thing going, keeping the office of imamate going. It's like in, I don't know if you guys have seen Iron Man 3, where there's like this Mandalorian figure who is kind of the representative or the symbol of the movement.
Not Mandalorian, the Mandarin.
The Mandarin, sorry, Mandarin. Yeah, the Mandarin, right? So you have the symbol of authority or leadership or whatever. That's kind of just, you want to keep that going. You want to keep up that facade, and that's the reason for the deputyship.
Okay. All right. By the way, some of the people just keep bringing back follow-up questions. So, guys, those would be interesting things to bring up in the post-debate VC. So you can bring those.
Is that 20 minutes? I feel like it's been more than 20 minutes.
Yeah. But I want to do the last one because this Uthman asked us and he didn't ask any previous question before that. After this class, because we're going to be ending the debate. So this one's the last one for Silverado. He says, Uthman, it seemed to be that wide range of critical creedal beliefs of the 12 or Shia are hidden, encrypted, obfuscated, I don't know how to say that, and only explained by some people who do taqiyya constantly. How can you explain this to a non-Muslim who have access to Quran and other main sources? What would be criteria for believing someone? Yeah.
Okay, so Imams did taqiyya during their lifetimes, yes, but we have hadith from their close companions which tell us their beliefs. And these beliefs are corroborated through like tawatur, and they come from the usul, which were written during the lifetimes of the Imams by their companions. So we have a good idea of what the Imams' beliefs were. And the purpose of the Shia Hadith project, which Musa mentioned previously, which Omar mentioned previously, which was to show that actually the Shia narrators were authentically attributing things to the Imams, because the whole purpose of that document is to show that there's like strong corroboration between things that the Shia attribute to the Imams and things that the Sunnis attribute to either the Imams or to the Prophet ﷺ as hadith. So the Shia were not just like fabricating this stuff and putting it on the Imam. They were actually conveying the beliefs of the Imams, and that's how we have a good idea of what the Imams actually believed.
Okay, perfect. All right. Yeah, so there are other questions, but those are mostly follow-ups. So feel free to mention those in the VC. I'm not sure if Sabar is going to say.
And Musa has a doc on taqiyya on his website, zurara.com. So that's.
Oh, yeah. So because he even DM'd you about that, he wanted to announce basically that they're going to be. He says that we plan on writing a document after this debate in the coming months on the topic addressing a lot of questions. So make sure to look out for it. He said it's going to be on his Zurara website. So yeah, this is his announcement. But yeah, that's really it for the debate. This was interesting. Thank you both debaters. And with that, we conclude. So I'm going to be ending the stage. But as I said, guys, we're going to be moving to the VC, and feel free to go there and ask, Amar, or I'm not even if still going to stay, ask questions. All right. Thank you, guys. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Make sure to move to VC. Yalla, move.